Hello, and welcome to Tudor, I Hardly Know Her.
Tudor, I hardly have my shit together.
Come on.
Nobody has our shit together. Oh shit, I didn't even notice those pledges. Hey guys. Thanks for being here. We're really excited to have you. And we're gonna talk some marmalade. How you guys doing?
Doing well, doing well. Ready to learn about stuff and stuff.
We're gonna learn about some serious stuff.
Some stuff.
No, I'm serious. It's stuff that's serious.
Oh, okay.
So, this is a topic I've wanted to do for a while. And I've been hesitant just because I want to be sure that we are respectful. So, I feel like there needs to be almost a, I don't know. Please forgive me if I say anything inappropriate. I'm going to try not to. I stuck to fact as much as I could. But today, I want to finally talk about Black Tudors. So I hope you guys are cool with that.
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
Are you ready? Okay. So, first of all, most of this information comes from a book that I haven't read yet, and I actually kind of want to read as our first book club choice for the Tudor I Hardly Know Her Patreon patrons who have joined the book club. But the book is called Black Tudors, The Untold Story, and it's by Miranda Kaufman. So I've been really wanting to read this one for a while just because it's such an interesting topic. If you guys think of history, you don't really, everything's whitewashed, right? Unless we're talking about the slave trade or...
I don't believe you.
You mean white people change history as it goes to their will?
It's almost... It's funny not in a ha-ha way, but in a funny and a what the fuck is wrong with you way. But when anything historical shows black people, all the white people go up in arms and they're like, there were no black people back then. Like, there was some BBC thing that showed a wealthy black family living in ancient Rome. And apparently people like went fucking crazy about it. I'm like, God damn, guys. Like, they were kind of around. It's okay. We just didn't really talk about it. But if you actually look at some Tudor tapestries and paintings and shit, there are Black Tudors.
Well, especially when a lot of the history, especially that kind of history, is all written. So a lot of times they're not. A lot of times they're probably just not writing. They're writing down just names.
Right.
They're not going to be writing down like what they look exactly unless there's paintings of them.
Okay, but let me get to these names because some of these names, it's kind of like Guy Incognito. So I'm not kidding. We're going to get to it and you're going to laugh respectfully. You will respectfully laugh. Okay, so Miranda Kaufman seems to be the only person who's really looked into the diversity of Tudor England. I found a couple of other articles, but really everything I looked up was from the last 8-9 years. And it's because everybody just assumes it's completely white back then, but it wasn't. And so Miranda Kaufman found that there were about 360-ish black individuals in Tudor England between 1500 and 1640. I would just like to point out that yes, there were a lot of white people, and so it's almost understandable that people nowadays would assume that history was only white people, but they weren't.
I'm sorry, what was the number that you said?
360 total.
That seems incredibly low.
It is, which would explain why it's hard to find information about them, but they definitely existed. They were actually at the courts of Henry VII, Henry VIII, Elizabeth I, and James I. So it's not like they were just toiling in fields or working as servants. They actually had pretty awesome jobs. And this was before England became slave traders, which didn't happen until the 1600s. So, they weren't involved in the slave trade, but slavery did come into play in how black people came to England. They came through trade, basically not trading of them, but they would trade between Africa and England. There were some that came from Southern Europe, and that's where Spain and Portugal had kept them as slaves. So, whenever Spain kind of, England and Spain were always fighting with each other. So whenever England would capture a Spanish ship and there were black people on it, they'd stay in England, obviously. But it's interesting to note because Garrett asked during our Spanish Princess episode if Catherine of Aragon would have had black people as part of her entourage. Turns out she would have. She did, and so did Philip II, because they were both from Spain, so it was completely normal for them to have that more diverse makeup. Now, I'm pretty sure some of them would have been slaves, but it's possible some of them could have been free. And definitely when they came to England, they would have been free because England didn't acknowledge slavery. Well, and not at that point.
Well, it makes sense thinking. I mean, me logistically thinking of just how Spain is really close to Africa in general. Like it's just right now, like it's just across a large sea or lake, or not lake, like a sea or a bay.
Yeah, and we were talking about that a little bit with Isabel of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon going to war with everybody who wasn't Catholic. So that would have been in Africa. So yeah, it really does logistically make sense. But some black people also arrived as merchants. They arrived as aristocrats. Like it was not just people arriving to serve white people. Interestingly, when England would raid the Spanish ships, and I mentioned this just now, they would encounter black people on board, and they would they took everything. They didn't treat them as slaves, but they would come back to England.
Well, that's what's weird to think about, because for us in America, we're just so used to everything dealing with black people in American history are slaves because they're brought here for that.
As slaves.
Whereas their countries are literally next door to each other, so it's not awkward or weird for someone to go from their country to just go right to Europe.
Right. I mean, a little bit more difficult in those days,
it's
but
something
still.
I honestly would never thought about until we talked about it today.
Right, and that's the same thing. Like, that's kind of why I wanted to talk about this. So I found a quote from this article that this author had. Excuse me. One prized ship brought into Bristol had 135. They got shipped back to Spain after being put up in a barn for a week. The authorities didn't know quite what to do with them.
Huh.
So I don't really know if it was. I really want to read this book, the Black Tudors, The Untold Story, because it talks specifically about 10 people that she found stories on, not stories, their history. So I kind of want that to be the first book club choice. So there's gonna be a discussion for a later time. But sometimes there was one woman who was literally the only black person in her village. Her name was Catalina. That means Catherine. And she lived independently, so that was pretty cool. There was a sailor named John Anthony who arrived on a pirate's boat. There was a guy named Diego, and he traveled with Francis Drake. There was a salvage diver named Jacques Francis, which,
Really?
holy shit, can you imagine salvage diving?
You're
holding your breath.
I would never thought of someone as a salvage diver back then.
I know, that is a baller fucking
It's good money.
job, right?
I mean, if you can hold your breath that long, it's good money.
Okay, now here's where the names come in. There was a silk weaver named, not kidding, Reasonable Black Man.
Oh my god.
Huh.
And it gets not worse, but the same. So there are a couple more names I'll tell you about in just a minute. Okay, no, I'll lie. Their names were very conspicuous. There was the last names usually were things like Swarthy, Blank, Blackman, and just Black.
Huh.
Yeah.
They,
But
they just didn't know what thought. Now, were these names they chose, or were they given to them when they arrived?
that I don't know.
Huh.
part of me wants to say, I mean, if you think about it,
I
if
would
they
imagine
came,
those were given.
I think
I would
they were
imagine those were
given
given to them.
because if they're arriving from a different country and they don't speak English and they're learning English, then somebody's just like,
What's your name?
Hey.
I'm Hugh, sir. Hugh man.
You're gonna be Blackman.
right. So,
Oh.
Yeah.
I assume it was names that were given to them, but I mean,
If anybody out there has more information than us or can like shed some light on this, please, because obviously we don't know what the fuck we're talking about.
right. I'm just going off of what I found in this interview. So, still though, even with names like Reasonable Blackman, they did have really specialized skills. They weren't all just sitting around waiting on nobles. That actually wasn't as commonplace as you'd suspect.
Yeah.
Based on our history of how shitty white people treat minorities. But they were seamstresses, brewers, porters, cooks, and they were paid well. Like there was one guy, John Blank. He was a royal trumpeter. He actually was the trumpeter at the celebrations of Henry VIII's and Catherine of Aragon's son, Henry, who died after 2 months. Remember that? He was there working as the trumpeter, and he got paid twice the average wage of an agricultural laborer and 3 times the wage of an average servant. So they were an anomaly, but they weren't outcasts. That was just something really interesting I found. They really integrated into society. They, married whoever they wanted. And, well, not whoever they wanted.
Well, that's what I was kind of curious about was because obviously it's a very heavy class system kind of world, but I didn't know if ever your race affected it that much back then. I mean, it sounds like they're like
it was mostly. I mean, I think they were just too anomalous
they're
to be factored
they're like
in.
extreme minority.
I mean, 360 people over 160 years. Yes, like that's.
So I'm sure with them, people just didn't really pay attention.
Kind of, but they were still. So they got married in the church. They were baptized, and we've talked about how important religion was. It was part of the culture. So the fact that they became Christian, if they weren't beforehand, and that they were accepted and buried and married and baptized in the churches really gave them more of a community. Although there was a black community that was formed during Elizabeth I's reign. In fact, they were incorporated in like Shakespeare's play. Not the black community, but Shakespeare had black characters, which I feel like a shitty white person for not knowing this, but Othello was a black character, which I had no clue about. But it was kind of before Elizabeth's reign, it wasn't, I'd say, weird. They were just kind of like, oh look, that person's a different color, not let's treat them like shit.
Surprisingly woke for the time.
A little bit woke for the time. And then Elizabeth happened, and she was a little less woke. She actually blamed some social issues on how many black people there were. And she basically tried to deport them. But it was only the ones who were brought in, like, from stealing Spanish ships and whatnot. They would, they would feed them and give them a place to stay, but then she'd try and kick them out. But if they were part of, if they were part of a business or anything, then they weren't. It wasn't quite Trumpian where they would just round up anybody of another race and try and kick them out of the country. It was more, if you're coming in, please reconsider and go back. But it was also during Elizabeth's reign that the courts set a precedent that basically made slavery illegal in England. So, and that's something really weird to think about. And I think slavery has come up a couple times in our podcast. Slavery wasn't a thing in England. They didn't have slaves in England. They had a slave trade, but
it's just fascinating to hear that. Just
I know
because how
the West India Company.
Yeah, how much the North American culture was based around slavery and having
formed from
yeah,
England,
like
yes.
like they would intentionally go to Africa to grab a bunch of people from there and bring them here for the whole intention they're going to work in their
Yes.
company fields wherever.
So I know it wasn't really related to the Tudor period, but I was still interested enough to look into how a country that didn't have slaves was still the basis of the slave trade. And it was kind of because of the Caribbean, because they were working plantations and getting a lot of their wealth from the Caribbean. So they would just take slaves over there and get their sugar and go. Because a lot of the Caribbean plantations were sugar plantations.
Yeah.
So, and it had something to do with the Dutch. I want to say like the Dutch actually had a slave trade going. And so the English were like, that looks profitable. Let's do that. But, yeah, it's just kind of weird to think that in the Tudor times, it wasn't.
Because a lot of times you always hear it as servants.
Yes.
People who are actually being paid to be there a lot of times.
Yeah.
Like who are different roles and everything.
So one interesting story I read was there was this lord, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry. There was a lord who was always getting mad at people, and he called in somebody who fucked something up. He would end up being the governor of Newfoundland one day. And the future governor fucked something up, and it pissed the lord off, and the lord was like, I think the guy's name is John. John beat him in public. And people were like, oh my gosh, the man is being beaten in public. Interesting fact, John, the guy beating him, was a black man. So it was a black man beating a white man in public. So it was worth mentioning, but not because it was a black man beating a white man, but because a man was being beaten in public as part of his punishment. So I feel like that kind of says how they thought of people back then. And it's just kind of crazy how it goes from, 100 years.
As long as you got a good beating arm, you're fine.
Yes, can I please just see the strength of your bicep? But it's just kind of interesting because if you think about it, like 100 years is not that much time. It's maybe 1.5 generations. It's like going from like us to our grandparents.
Yeah.
Like in that much time, people went from seeing black people as, oh look, there's something different.
The civil rights movement and all that to where we are now.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Where it seems like it's all falling apart again.
Go America.
Well, what's even weird is like talking to my parents. My mom has memories of being in school, being taught how Native Americans were still savages back then.
Yep. And they were. They were still called Indians.
I think that my mom brought up like when her parents, so our grandparents, they were being taught things that Custer was a hero.
Yeah, right.
Whereas now it's like, oh, yep, clearly like, he was. Now he was an idiot.
I mean, not just an idiot.
Just a fool who went and massacred for no reason.
Turns out when your history books are written by most
people?
likely old white men,
Yep.
it's gonna be that way.
So, I saw a thing on Twitter the other day that got me thinking, and once again, it's that white privilege that I know we all have, which makes me feel guilty. But it was somebody tweeted a question asking, who was your first black teacher? And I was like, oh shit, I never had a single black teacher. Never.
Oh my God.
Ever.
Yeah, even I'm having to kind of think about it. I'm even trying.
Not even in college.
I'm trying to think of even like the specialty teachers, like the arts or.
Yeah. And I know it's I
remember
it's that thing where we're just
the
like
funny thing is I remember my sister, who's 5 years younger than me, 4 years younger than me. I remember she had a teacher in junior high, like her 6th grade year, her math teacher. I remember meeting him a few times, talking to him because he and I would talk about Star Wars together. But
Of course.
After that I can't.
But it's weird that you can think of one.
Yeah, that just
I
shows
can think of
how
none. Garrett,
messed up things are.
how many did you have?
I went to a Catholic school for preschool to kindergarten to grade school to junior high.
So precisely 0.
Precisely 0, and there were maybe 5 black kids in the entire school.
God, it's
However, then I went to public school afterwards, and whoa, that was a change.
Now, Grant, probably where we grew up, also
We live in
especially.
Indiana.
I'm living
not like we live
I'm
in
living in suburbs
Chicago or New York.
I was living in suburbs of Indianapolis, so I
Yeah.
especially was.
It's just kind of interesting. It's those things that we
You
don't
don't-
think about.
You don't pay attention to at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Like I never,
Yeah, and you're saying even college, I can't think of any
I didn't have a single one.
college I had.
Yeah. It's really screwed up how we live in a world where we're like, these aren't things that we're thinking about. And we grew up seeing, like when we were kids, we would see examples of white teachers, even male teachers, which were a little less common. And so we would still think, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. But then there are these minorities who aren't who can't see that. So
Well, I mean, for me, it was like growing up was like from like kindergarten to 5th grade. It was weird
my
to see a
God.
male teacher.
I had one male
I-
teacher
there was-
until
I
middle
had
school.
one male teacher in grade school. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah.
There was only one that taught in my elementary school. I didn't have
Same
him.
here.
My sister,
Oh my God, guys! My one male teacher from 8th grade looked just like Henry VIII.
Oh my God, Henry
This
VIII
just unlocked
is
in
your
my brain.
teacher.
Oh my God!
Henry VIII. Fun fact: Henry VIII was Garrett's teacher.
History. He was pretty cool.
Yeah, I didn't ever have male teacher even until 6th grade.
Yeah.
Mr. Budzinski.
Mr. What?
Mr. Budzinski.
My teacher was Mr. Lovelace, and I did not like him. Sorry, Mr. Lovelace, if you're listening to this now. I was a 5th grader with an attitude problem.
Was he in a wheelchair and didn't have a dick?
Aw.
He wasn't in a wheelchair. I know nothing about the other part.
Did he have a giant mechanical spider?
Oh God. That's such an obscure reference.
my
I'm surprised if
God.
anyone gets. I'm not gonna
When
say
you
what
say
it is.
giant mechanical spider, everybody knows what you're talking
I
about.
fucking hope so. That's a classic.
The
You're
unmade.
talking about that Superman.
Yeah,
movie.
the unmade Superman movie with by Kevin
Exactly.
Smith.
Yep. Yes. So yeah, it's a very short episode, which also another reason we should feel like shit as white people.
It's a weird.
Well, you haven't read that book, and we just don't know. Like, there's not a whole.
Well,
Yeah,
there's
Jeff
not
and I can't really contribute too much.
people aren't, but it's not just that. I was looking into this for a while, and there's not much out there besides that book. I think there were 2 or 3 others, and it's appalling that I can find like 5,000 books about Anne Boleyn, Henry VIII,
I mean, if
Thomas
anything,
Cromwell.
this helps kind of bring it out to light. Like, hey,
It
this
does.
is a subject that probably
Could
needs
use some research.
Needs some more research and looking
Yeah.
into beyond
It's-
just a single person.
and the unfortunate reality of it might just be like there's nothing. You just can't because
But
like
that's
there were
not-
no like prominent. Like highly prominent, like on the level of an Anne Boleyn or
Possibly.
or a Catherine of Aragon.
Possibly, but Miranda Kaufman, the author of this book, she said that she kind of discovered the existence of Black Tudors by accident because she was researching something completely different, and she just kind of stumbled upon this portrait of a black man in Tudor times, and she realized that there was no readily available information, and she said it's the problem is that people aren't asking the right questions to get these kind of answers. So we have to kind of change the way we question things because we're looking at things with a modern view set.
Yeah.
So if we were looking at, I mean, before I even did this episode, the 3 of us used to occasionally bring up whether black people were slaves in England, and that was just our assumption because that's all we knew. And so we had to relook at it. So it's not necessarily that nothing's out there, it's that we need to start looking at it differently to find what's out there.
Right.
Man, this is our most woke episode ever.
Definitely much more of a serious subject we've probably ever covered.
That's okay. I still think it's really
Not
fascinating
a lot of
and
jokes.
absolutely worth knowing. But I just did think it was really interesting and totally worth finally devoting an episode to. But I'd like to read the book Black Tudors for book club. And
That would be a really good one because that could have a lot of discussion you could have with it.
and I was kind of hesitant because it's nonfiction, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do nonfiction for the book club, but the formatting of the book, I think, lends itself really well to book club. Plus, it leads to a really awesome discussion, I think. So, I think that's going to be I think that's our first book for book club, guys. Yay! So you can still join and become a part. So that's kind of it. Like I said, it was really short based on minimal research, but maybe we can do a part 2 after I read the book and
if anybody,
to us. Yeah,
if any of our listeners know anything, like shoot us what you know.
Even if it's like tangentially related.
Or if you
Did
know,
I use that word correctly?
I don't even know the word.
Listeners, tell me if I'm wrong. You're usually really good at that.
Or like if you know other sources we could use to research, send it our way. Anything to help us.
We just need to have an episode of everything people have said. Hey, you did this wrong, or you said this wrong, and then just give.
Well, that would be like 3 episodes. I'm just kidding. It's better since
maybe that's episode 100, the one where we make up for all of our sins.
Oh God.
It's just an hour of us going, "We're sorry. We're sorry."
Sorry.
So I think that's it for this topic.
Yeah.
But we do have a new portion where we shout out to our new Patreon supporters.
Yay.
So for those of you who didn't tune into the last episode, we have finally launched our Patreon, and we have various levels, including the book club I mentioned, but we have some shout outs to make to our members of... Shoot, I'm terrible at remembering what I called the levels.
The shout outs are okay, so let me go over the tiers for everybody in case you don't know what's going on. So we launched a Patreon, and right now we're 100% completely funded for what we needed. It was a very low bar to set, but we did it pretty quickly. So thank you guys to everyone who has contributed. And again, if you don't contribute or can't contribute, don't worry, you're still going to get the normal podcast.
Yep.
On very irregular schedules like we always do. We're trying to get better about that.
Yes, we are.
So let me go over the tiers. I've got it pulled up right here.
Thank y'all.
So for $1 or more, you are a core tier where you get access to all of our bonus episodes where we'll do commentaries, maybe some episodes that are tangentially related to the Tudors, stuff like that, maybe something that's not quite in there. Also, just so you know, all the higher tiers get everything below. As far as I know.
No,
right?
All the tiers get the bonus episodes.
Yes.
Every tier will get that tier plus everything that would have been under that tier.
Yes.
Oh, fuck. Then I got to change my list.
That's how it works.
We
right,
done fucked up. Okay.
It's okay. We barely talked about this. So
yes.
At the second level, we have the Lords and Ladies. For $5 or more per month, you can join me, Jeff, and Emily in a Q&A session, get a shout out, and you get access to the bonus episodes. For $15 or more per month, you are a cup bearer. You can join Emily's Tudor Book Club, plus access to the bonus episodes, the Q&A session, the shout outs, yada, yada, yada. Then finally, we have at the highest tier, Groom of the Stool. For $50 or more per month, an ad or sponsorship or whatever, if you have your own podcast or a business or anything you want to promote, or just say, hey, I want to promote this episode and get just a huge shout out wherever we're going to put these ads, if anybody wants to do that. And then everything below as well.
Yep. Okay. I'm just making sure I have the extras.
While Emily's doing that, visit us on Twitter at Tudor Know Her, or follow us on Facebook. Tudor I Hardly Know Her is the name of our page.
Hooray. Okay. Shout out.
You can also email us at tudorknowher at gmail.com.
Yes. Okay. Shout outs. Thank you to our lords and ladies and cupbearers. Jackie Moore, Melissa S., Marlena, Emily Blomer. I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your names. Caroline Ingrid, Rhiannon J., Philip Nako, Rachel Richardson, and Samantha. We appreciate you guys supporting us. It means the world to us that you actually care enough about us to offer this, and we're really excited to have you listening.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. right?
Yeah, I think we're there.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Divorce, beheaded,
Divorce,
Beheaded, survived.
died. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
How the fuck do we do this again?
I don't know.